Hi, you all, and welcome to the Voices of Logistics Planet podcast, where we deep dive into the world of logistics, uncovering its many layers through industry professionals. And today we are hosting a truly fascinating guest. If my calculations are correct, he brings over 45 years of experience in logistics. Maybe, Brandon will correct me. So he's currently the driving force behind the Air Forwarders Association. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Brandon Fried, if I pronounce it correctly.
It's free, but that's okay. I've been called worse. Thomas, thanks for having me today.
Yeah. So,
Good to
Brandon,
see
thank you
you.
for yeah, good to see you again. So it's thank you for taking the time joining us today, and we are excited having you here. And in this episode, I think it's very timely because we will talk more about freight forwarding, in particular forwarding and maybe other forwarding types, and then we talk about the tariffs, trends, and all other things. So I think those in freight forwarding will find a lot of insight because Brandon is the guy who knows a lot, if not everything. Yeah.
Well, I ask my wife and kids. They don't think I know so much. So it's great to be here, and on this special occasion. This is Liberation Day here in the United States. This is when Donald Trump, I guess, liberates us from our savings and our bank accounts. So this is when all the tariffs probably take effect. So should be an interesting day. Thank you.
Good. So we'll start with this perfect note, and let's ease it a little bit. So Brandon, so let's start, I think, with your story. So how did you find your way in the freight forwarding, and
Yeah. So, believe it or not, I'm a recovering freight forwarder. I owned and operated a franchise of a global freight forwarder here in the Washington, D.C. area for about 25 years. And when I sold that business 20 years ago, I was asked to come in and run our trade association, the Air Forwarders Association, here in the U.S. We represent not only U.S. businesses, but international forwarders who have U.S. offices, have U.S. interests. We have about 225 members, member companies, and we are primarily focused on advocacy on the regulatory side with the regulatory agencies within the U.S. government, featuring, let's say, Customs and Border Protection, the Transportation Security Administration, Food and Drug Administration, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and others. And then, of course, we have an ambitious Capitol Hill legislative agenda where we work on with our lobbyists on the Hill on various legislative initiatives of importance to the freight forwarders here in the U.S. And over the past few years, we've been spreading out internationally, not necessarily by planting roots overseas, but by being at various events and being injecting ourselves into the narrative, into the discussion about what's going on globally. So that's what the Air Forwarders Association is all about.
in few words, you're making the life of freight forwarders easier. Yeah? So you're
Yeah, I've
helping to
always
build
said, Thomas,
dialogue.
yeah, this is a simple business fraught with complexity. It's a very simple business. All we're doing is moving boxes. If only it was that simple, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there are many things in between. So, and
Mhm.
what are the freight forwarders living now? What are the biggest trends, I would say, today shaping the air forwarders world?
Yeah, so we have a pretty ambitious agenda. Obviously, here in the United States, our primary focus is what on the Transportation Security Administration, the TSA, because we're nothing if we're not secure and safe, and so we operate here in the U.S. under a security program that is provided by the TSA. And as you might imagine, there are a lot of details that we adhere to. In addition to that, here in the U.S., uh, we screen all our cargoes so that the private industry, thanks to the TSA's certified cargo screening program, allows private industry, allows the freight forwarding community to register and become part of that program to screen its own cargo prior to being brought to the airport under secure methods. Not all our members are screeners, only a certain smaller percentage are. If they don't do their own screening, of course, they can screen at the airport using the airline or what they call independent facilities that can do the screening for them. But screening is now the law of the land here in the U.S., as it is pretty much everywhere. And so engagement with TSA is crucial. We were also we held a federal advisory committee appointment. There are committees that are set up to advise the agencies. In particular, we were members of the Aviation Security Advisory Committee. They call it the ASAC, which advises the TSA administrator. Unfortunately, when the new administration took office a couple months ago, those committees were disbanded. We're told it's going to be reconstituted again, but we've held that advisory position representing freight forwarders, their cargo interests for over 20 years. So we're hoping that gets started again. But that's one aspect of what we're doing. Obviously, we're very focused, even though we're not customs brokers, we don't represent the customs brokers. Many of our members have customs brokerage divisions and they have customs brokers within their companies. So we're obviously very focused on import regulations, import duties, and that's of course brings us to the tariff discussions. That's very much on our radar screen. But there are other things as well. We're concerned about sustainability. We have many committees within our organization. The sustainability committee is just one of them that promotes ecological and carbon neutral practices within our membership. We have a regulatory compliance committee. We have a technology committee where we're focused on looking at all the different technologies out there. It's a big marketplace and there's a lot of noise. And so this committee invites various vendors to come in and give us a presentation and let us know what their products do. And then we have because here in the U.S., you're allowed to use canines, dogs, to screen cargo. The TSA set up what they call the third-party privatized canine program, and they're regulated under TSA, and they're in our membership also. So we have a, a, a canine subcommittee as well. We also have a truck fraud committee that's just getting started now because that's a prevalent issue here in the U.S., but that's a prevalent issue pretty much everywhere. So that's just an example of some of the committees that we're involved in. And we have a very active 15-person board of directors. It's not just Brandon. You see Brandon's face a lot, but there are a
Yeah.
lot of people behind me. And we just had our annual conference, by the way. It was called Air Cargo 2025. We had over 1,000 people in Dallas, Texas, and an exhibit hall that had 105 people. Fantastic program. We had a great keynote speaker, Mikey McBrien, from a company called Buffalo Airways. And for those of you who might not know Buffalo Airways, there was a television show called Ice Pilots that was on the History Channel, where they were flying
Nice.
World War II era planes. By the way, not the planes that were made in World War II or during World War II. These are planes that actually flew in World War II. And the owner's son, Mikey, is probably the star of the show, and he joined us in Dallas as well. Not only as our keynote speaker, but he joined us throughout the conference, and he's one of our newest friends, and he's getting involved as well.
Nice. I know. Who knows? Maybe next year I will join your event.
Absolutely, and we invite you to do so. Maybe you can help us run panels because we have a lot of opportunities for panels. We discuss a lot of current events, impacts on the industry, impact in just on our customers in general. And all the topics that need to be addressed, we grapple with at this conference. Plus, it's a great networking conference. If you want to get involved in the U.S. forwarder market and you want to meet U.S. forwarders and others who can help your business be more successful overseas, come to the Air Cargo Conference. Next year, it's in Orlando, Florida, in February 15th through the 17th.
Oh, nice. So it's not far away, yeah.
Not far away. Don't remind me. Don't remind me. So there's a lot of
Good.
planning. We got a big planning group that helps out.
Good. Good, good. So, Brandon, you mentioned two important committees, I would say. One is technologies, and you said there's a lot. I know you have some technology where's members at for association. So what's happening in this field? Yeah, are
Mhm.
there some other things? Maybe maybe you're already thinking about drone deliveries. Maybe you have for this in this field. I don't know, or autonomous or other things. And of
Yeah,
course, you touch another thing is sustainability. So we'll come
yeah.
back to this later. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's this is an interesting business, Thomas, as you know, and our organization is a microcosm of the business. So we have the large, what I would call the intergalactic forwarders, who are the DSVs and the Kuehne+Nagel's and FedEx Trade. We got these big forwarders who are quite capable and knowledgeable about technology, and they're making their investments. And then we have the medium-sized forwarders that are also making investments. Some of them are actually producing their own technology in house. And then, of course, we have the smaller. I call them the Fred's Freights of the world. So we serve a lot of disparate interests. But what we're seeing now is, how the buzzword or the buzz term now is AI, and artificial intelligence, and we see a lot of that injected into the transportation process or
Uh,
becoming.
do you see any real solutions? Because I hear I there, and when talking about real solutions, all it comes up to order management and maybe some transactional, emails or other things.
Yeah,
Or
yeah, and maybe they'll answer the telephone and talk to you, that kind of thing. And this is a people business. I want to be clear about that. Technology is but a tool. And it is an essential tool. And we tell that to our members. You need to be automated in some fashion. But we can't tell our members how to run their businesses, because not everyone sees the forwarding world in the same way. Let me give you an example. We have members that focus, like we have one called Rocket Cargo, and they focus on transportation of entertainment bands. Think the Rolling Stones.
maybe they were involved in those old big bands,
Yeah,
old
and they're
noise.
chartering planes and they're doing that. That's their niche. We have others that are focused just on transportation of artwork. We have people transport, they'll do just transportation of pharmaceuticals. All it just we have one that just focuses on the transportation of wind turbines for wind farms, and so each one of these has their own technology requirements. And then, of course, you have small companies that say, I don't need the technology. I need to be talking and holding my customer's hand. That's the relationship I have. That's the nature of my business. So, we have to make allowances for everyone. But I would say that generally speaking, what's coming around the corner through automation is indeed very exciting. And as I said, a lot of noise. There are a lot of people selling products that probably are not sustainable in the long run. But like as an example, I talk to our customs brokers friends, and they tell me that AI is now being implemented in uh, the customs import transactions, line items. It can, read emails. And I met a fellow. I was at the Manifest conference in Las Vegas a couple of months ago, and I met a fellow from India who, is working on automation for phone answering. And I rolled my eyes and thought to myself, how good can this be? And he said, no, you could try it. He said, well, you get back to the office, let's try it together. And I got to tell you, Thomas, I mean, I'm not saying it was 100%, but it was close. And I could see where if he works on a few things, it's going to be pretty convincing. But in the end, you have to have a person overseeing what's going on, because, as you know, I mean, I love ChatGPT. I love playing with all the what's offered out there. But the reality is those things hallucinate. They'll start telling
Yeah.
lies about, it said I was a PhD from Harvard in air freight. And I mean, I'm running with it. I think it's great, but it's not true. And the reality is that that's what you need to look out for. So you can't remove the people from the equation.
Yeah, so if I don't know if this is your cup of tea, but basically, if you would look at this, which artificial intelligence solutions in logistics you would think will be the stickiest, those who will, generate the real fast, returns on investment and get more out of
I think the
customers even.
stickiest are going to, well, there are a number of things that I've seen that are impressive in terms of customs entries, being able to pick apart commodities and assign HTS codes and things like that. I think that there's a lot of room for growth there. And, that will definitely save in manpower so that you can devote those people to other tasks within your organization. So I think that's exciting. Another thing I think is exciting is regulatory compliance. I received a demo yesterday from a company that basically mines, it'll look at your bill of lading, it'll look at your customs entry coming into the United States, and it will do automatic searches as to who those shippers are, who made the commodity that's being shipped, and whether or not those entities tangentially are linked to nefarious entities. So,
Nice.
like, or there, we have the Uyghur law here in the U.S. that prevents introduction of goods into the U.S. Supply chain that were made in the Uyghur region of China, and you'll see that. The other big issue here is fentanyl, and fentanyl killed 100,000 Americans last year. And what's been happening is that the precursors, the chemicals that come in for fentanyl, come in piecemeal, and there are companies out there that they don't adequately provide descriptions to their goods coming in, or they lie about it. And this company was able to show me how certain firms overseas in places like China have been known to do this. You would not recognize it from the bill of lading that you initially see or from that customs entry, but they're able to look and see, no, no, these people have been convicted, on 4 occasions. These are the products they've been selling, that type of thing. So I think that we would not be able to do that without the use of automation. And I think it's really going to be developed and improved in the future.
Nice. Yeah, those technologies are really moving fast. No
Mm-hmm.
doubts. Let's see what will happen next. And about, sustainability. I know that, for example, in sea freight, yeah, there are already a lot of solutions, eco engines in the liners, and, even the ships are moved by with the wind, with the help of wind and other things. What
Yep.
about air? No, I think this is, do we have some already solutions? Maybe company, maybe your committees are thinking about this. What to do here, and the other thing is, how to sell, those. They want to sell such solutions. Is it an easy thing, or still we have a lot of private shoppers?
Yeah. So you do see airlines and some forwarders selling carbon credits and ecologically friendly transportation. I think that's in its nascent stages. From a long term perspective, IATA proclaimed a few years ago. I'll never forget. I went to a meeting in Boston where Willie Walsh, the head of IATA, was their annual airlines meeting, members meeting, and he basically said we're going to be carbon neutral by 2050. And you heard a collective gulp in the room. People thinking, how are we going to do that? And of course, the airlines are focused on sustainable aviation fuel. Now, remember, freight forwarders, generally speaking, generally are asset averse. Generally, we don't have our own planes. We have a couple. We have someone on our board of directors who's a freight forwarder and he owns his own planes. But the reality is that we buy our transportation from others, and this is it's a big concern. How are you going to be able to manufacture and produce sustainable aviation fuel at the record levels the levels it needs to reach a saturation point. Only 2 or 3% of what's available or is available is what's needed. Plus, I talked to a guy. I was flying on a flight back from Europe a few months ago, and he owned an oil company, and he focused on sustainable aviation fuel. Talk about convenience. And he said the problem is the challenge is not only refinery capacity, but the engines of the planes can't just they all can't do it. So there's a lot of work to be done. But I think the biggest impediment is regulation and governments willing to step up to the plate. I think, unfortunately, here in the United States, you're in a regulatory adverse environment where you're going to see a de-emphasis on a lot of the sustainability initiatives or requirements that we saw during the Biden administration. And I go to places like California as an example that has got very strict sustainability requirements. And for business, a lot of them are very expensive. As an example, California has a reporting requirement. If your business bills more than I think $1 billion, that's a B with $1 billion a year, which nowadays is not such a big deal.
Mm.
And you have to provide a sustainability or carbon burn report to the state of California. And we did some checking, and to get that report drafted and prepared is close to $50,000. And it's just those requirements are probably things that we need to take a second look at. But generally speaking, we're starting to see more initiatives, newcomers into the business, the people who are just getting out of school and are becoming interested in logistics. They have sustainability on their minds. This is something that this is going to be not only their industry, it's going to be their world, and they want to make sure that it's around for them and their children.
Yeah, but do you just wanted to understand because everyone is talking about the sustainability. Everyone says that they need it. Liners, aircraft, operators, everyone. But do you see, do you see the actual shift happening? Is this already happening, or
Yeah, I
just putting a checkbox
Yeah, so you see a
on the
little of
plan?
both. You see a little of both. Look, we're in a very competitive industry. You know that as well as I do. What is there like 100,000 freight forwarders worldwide? Heck, here in the United States, they're registered with 4,000 are registered with the TSA. So it's a competitive business. If the water level has to rise, all boats together, and you can't have someone that is ignoring it and competing against someone who is abiding by the sustainability initiatives at great expense. That's obviously a big concern. But I do think we're seeing the beginning stages of what could be a tidal wave of sustainability initiatives that are going to be here for the long run. This current presidential administration is probably, obviously we know for the next 4 years. We don't know whether he's going to have another term. I mean, if
Yeah.
you ask him, he thinks it's possible, but the U.S. Constitution won't allow it. But the reality is that there'll be other administrations that come in, maybe more liberal, who will start looking at this again. I don't see a tremendous amount being done in this administration for sustainability here in the United States, but I could be wrong. Prove me wrong.
Yeah, this of course depends from regulators a lot. So
Yeah.
let's see. From my point of view, what I see also, is that sustainable logistics, it's more expensive, but of course there are customers that are ready to pay more, and we see this some brands that are already buying, green freight and so on and so forth. But
Oh yeah,
I
we're
think
seeing it. No, no, and we've got members have said to us, "No, we're serious about this," and our hats off to them. And they've got customers that have come to them. Thomas, it all goes back to the customer.
yeah,
Right? If the customer calls you into their offices and says, "In order for us to do business together, You need to have a sustainability initiative and a demonstrated program that shows that you're cutting carbon emissions. Who are you buying your transportation from? What are you doing in your warehouses to cut down on carbon emissions? Are you electrifying your forklift fleet? Are you using, climate systems to bring down your electrical spend? All those things. And I find that our members are most reactive when a customer has told them that they have to do that. Their
Yeah,
livelihood at stake.
good, good. So good. So we hope that in the future we'll have more and more initiatives because we have only one planet here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And by the way, the Europeans are way ahead of us.
yeah,
When I go to Europe, I see it. They're just much more. It's cultural there. It's indoctrinated. Like and I go back to the electric car initiative here in the U.S. There's a de-emphasis on electric cars, um, even though the president's right-hand guy now is an electric car company manufacturer. But the reality is that I think Europeans are far ahead. They've adopted electric cars. They're continuing to do so. I think that's going to take a back seat here. Unfortunately, I've got one, and it was full disclosure, and we need to be focused on cutting carbon emissions, and I think that's a great way to do it. But we need more adoption here.
good. So, Brandon, you started our podcast with the Liberation Day, yeah? So let's move to this part. So, I know that this is very hot and topic in both the USA and other parts of the world
Yeah,
because everyone now is involved, For example, in Europe, every shipment which is carried, so every second shipment is somehow involved. We have something involved with USA, so this is a
yeah.
really tough question. So what about those tariffs and the minimus and other things? Do you see that changes happen? Will changes happen in this business, logistics
Well,
business? We will see negative or maybe positive things, So what's your opinion on that?
I think I want to say something to be clear. Tariffs are an essential tool in trade negotiations, and they should be used judiciously, and to levels that are commensurate with keeping trade balanced. But with that said, I think the tariff approach that the current administration is implementing might be a bit overboard. Heck, might be. I think it really is. I mean, you've seen some drastic proposals, drastic numbers. We won't know until this afternoon when the White House lets us know exactly what they are. But I think that what they're doing now is they're serving to alienate our most valued trade partners. And we have to realize that we're now in a global marketplace. The days of the U.S. supporting itself because it can't depend on other countries, they're over. I mean, trade is essential. What it's doing here in the U.S., unfortunately, is creating a lot of uncertainty, and not only within our members, but also our members' customers. I was just at a major airlines a large customer meeting last week in Phoenix, and they told us we're already seeing a softening in bookings. The traveling public is losing confidence, and Thomas, the most concerning aspect is the consumers losing confidence. They're holding on tighter to their wallets because they don't know what to expect. Trump is focusing on what he calls, I think he's the dirty 15 countries. There have been a lot of proposals out there, not the least of which is a flat fee. As you know, they've been looking at the de minimis of the low value threshold clearances coming in. Um, and of course, we're hitting Mexico and Canada, our two biggest trading partners as well. But here's what I think is going to happen. First of all, other countries like China, as an example, they're going to start hitting oil, gas, coal, cars. They're going to be launching, and they already are launching more investigations into U.S. interests. Think Google as an example. Up in Canada, the provinces are fighting back against the United States. They're pulling U.S. whiskey off the shelves, as an example. And there's going to be retaliation, and reciprocal tariffs as well. And then in the end, the worst part about it is that, and I hope the White House understands this, is that it's a big world out there. countries will leave the United States. They'll trade with others and they'll figure out a way. Nature abhors a vacuum. So what we've seen in the last month or so, we saw a bump in air freight. We saw a bump in cargo coming into the U.S. as we think that companies are front loading, if you will, stocking up their warehouses. And we've been telling our members, start communicating with your customers, start making sure, make sure they have a strategy as to where they're sourcing. If they're sourcing out of China, make sure they understand what could come. There's more of an emphasis on Southeast Asia, and manufacturing or sourcing goods out of India. So we'll see. And I think that here's the other thing. You need to remember our current president here is a deal maker. He was a very successful real estate guy. It's all about the deal. So I'm sure what's going to happen is people are going to be coming hats in hand to the White House to sit down and work a deal with President Trump. And that's what we're going to see. We're even seeing it this morning with, I think it was India announced that they're ready to sit down and make a deal. So that's where we are. But it's been
And then, of course, those tariffs will go down, but they won't reach the levels which are today, of course. So,
right. No. And that, look, the U.S., unfortunately, the U.S. worker has a high standard of living. They have high wages. It's been tough. But I think the issue here is that if these tariffs persist, if you persist in implementing them, we're going to see inflation numbers skyrocket here in the United States. We're going to see a loss of jobs. And one of the issues that uh, with tariffs is that it hides bad behavior. In other words, if your factory isn't producing a quality product or an efficiently produced product, a tariff will protect you. But unfortunately, that puts poor products into the U.S. market. Is that good for us? I mean, this is one of the big concerns. And I'm not saying that we can't work things out with, that we have to we shouldn't protect ourselves from China. Obviously, 75% of what's coming in from China into the U.S. It's a big part of our economy. Going to Walmart or a Target store, and it's the same thing over in Europe. So we have to have protection mechanisms in place. But I would say that I think we need to be peacefully negotiating some equitable agreements with them, and we'll see what happens. But we're very concerned about it, and especially it's concerned on the American consumer and the U.S. small business.
okay. And if, let's say, everything will stay like it is, we'll have those 25%, even more, and then so on and so forth. What will happen then? You said that some business will go out of will go bankrupt, yeah. And
Yeah.
what about freight forwarding? Then this, of course, will affect freight forwarding, general logistics, in a really, really negative way
Mm-hmm. I think
from
so.
both, in and out. Is
Yeah,
it USA
it's not good.
companies
Look,
or
look. I said at the beginning of our encounter today, we move boxes for a living, and we move them between countries. And the reality is that it's going to consumer demand will wane. There'll be less demand for products from overseas. There won't be as many boxes moving. And that's a big concern for freight forwarders. That's why freight forwarders need to diversify their markets. They have to be ready and to give advice to customers. We thrive on change. We need to be flexible. That's what we do, and we have to get our customers ready for that. Um, there's a lot of noise coming out of the White House right now. We don't. I always. I saw someone last week that said, "Don't read the tweets or don't mind the tweets. Look at what's going on and dismiss the rhetoric." Hopefully that will be the case. But look, he's trying to set up. I want to say something. I want to be clear about this too. I don't think this is a revenue play, even though the president, says, "Oh, look how much money I'm going to collect for the United States." The reality is the U.S. consumer is going to pay for this. If there's a 25% tariff, Thomas, there's no way, it's going to be eaten on the other end. But, they're going to charge it to the recipient or the buyer of those goods. So we need to be looking at that as well and correcting that perception. But I think that long term, it's not sustainable for us to be paying high prices, and it will stymie the U.S. economy in short order. Maybe not right away, but within a couple of months, you'll start seeing the ripple effects.
And what do you think about the thing that saying that everyone will go back to USA, produce in USA, and everyone will be happy. We will have a huge economy. So how do you think on
That ship has
this?
sailed. That's gone. It's look. As I said earlier, this is a global economy now. The U.S. cannot wall itself off from the rest of the world and be self-sustaining. I mean, even he wants us. He's going to put a big tariff on American cars. I'm sorry, on foreign cars, so that you buy American cars. Well, the reality is American cars have foreign components in them. There's mixed metals and that type of thing, and widgets that go into those cars that are bought from overseas. Even the Teslas have that. So the reality is that I think that that's going to be hard to do. Plus, we need to keep U.S. auto manufacturers on their toes, just as we have to keep other manufacturers on their toes, because obviously innovation is important, and the manufacture of quality products is also important. But look, going back to what this is all about, he Trump wants behavior change. He wants a level playing field. And he's right in that there are instances where the playing field is in fact distorted and it has to be leveled. Um, and he's also looking at things like fentanyl. I mean, we and how it's come in, and the de minimis, and the low values. He blames a lot of the fentanyl precursors coming in off these low value, properly declared
But this
organisms.
would stop this. This.
Yeah. So
If
so
there is a market, everyone will find a way. This
Exactly,
is.
and those fentanyl precursors, even fentanyl itself, it's coming in off the southern border, hidden in trucks. You could say, well, maybe at the beginning when de minimis first started, a lot of the precursors were coming in that fashion, but that's not the case. And we know it's definitely the contemplated change in de minimis. It's not about revenue, because Customs and Border Protection here in the U.S. tells us that the average low value entry coming into the U.S. is just $54. So it's not going to be a big revenue producer. But it's going to be interesting to see. And the other thing, and as long as I'm talking about de minimis, is that that horse has already run out of the barn. Closing the barn door is not going to stop the U.S. consumer from online ordering. They love ordering from Amazon and Temu and Shein, and this is what they want to do. Now it's probably going to get more expensive, but those companies have been planning for this for a while. They have alternate strategies. I know that they've been front loading and putting goods into U.S. markets for our U.S. warehouses for quite some time. I ordered an umbrella last year for my patio from Temu, I think it was, and in a day and a half, this pink umbrella was sitting on, and a big one too, was sitting on my patio. Now,
Yeah.
it didn't come from China. It was sitting in a warehouse here, and we're going to see more.
Good, Bennett. Time flies. So just to sum up, our conversation, one last question. I know you've been in the business for many, many years and withstood many changes throughout your career. So what advice could you give, for those not big freight forwarders, big freight forwarders will survive, they will adjust, they're, outsource help, and this will happen, but for those small, maybe medium freight forwarding companies who, want not just survive, but also thrive. And so you said one thing already, that to diversify the markets, but what other advices you could give for those small businesses,
Yeah,
which I think one way or another, they're now worried.
yeah. So I tell this I encounter a lot of new forwarders who are coming into the market, and they sit down with me and they say, "What would you do?" I said, and in retrospect, as I look back on my career, I would say there are some essential things. And by the way, I didn't always take my own advice. So I want to be clear about this, but this is how I see things from where I sit now. First of all, invest in technology and automation. Automation is your friend, but don't let it run your business. People are still very much an important part. Stay in touch with your customer. Make sure that you're visiting customers and giving advice and hearing their needs outside of times of crisis, so that when challenges occur, you're there as a resource for them. Ignore a lot of the noise that you hear about, and stand back and look at things, but make decisions. Be nimble, be flexible at the same time, and make sure you stay informed. Learn something new, get educated. I know at the Air Forwarders Association we have several education providers that we have agreements with. You can get some learning modules online inexpensively that just keep you informed, and also keep abreast of what's going on internationally. Make sure that you know what's in the news. I tell this to my members all the time. I have members come to me and says, "Well, we're just domestic." And I say, "No, you're not. You think you're domestic, but you need to understand that the shipment you're putting on your truck between Dallas, Texas and Des Moines, Iowa is somehow or another tangentially related to something going on overseas." And with that, I think we need to stay optimistic, because this is not a merry-go-round. This is a roller coaster. Things go up and down, and as freight forwarders, we need to be flexible and ready for it.
Good. Nice summary. So Brandon, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your incredible journey, insights, and advices, to all of us. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in for the Voices of Logistics Channel podcast. We
Well,
hope you
thank you,
enjoyed.
Thomas. Thanks for having me, and keep up the good work.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So let's keep in touch. And all of the listeners, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Yeah. So thank you, Brandon. It was really a great conversation.
Okay, take care.
Take care. Bye.